Hey there, my name is James, and in this video, I'll be teaching you everything you need to know to play your first game of Star Trek Into the Unknown using the Learn to Play Guide's tutorial story mission at Perdition's Gate. Star Trek Into the Unknown is a tactical miniatures game for 2 players. Each player will take control of a fleet to compete in evolving multi-part missions. A mission in Star Trek Into the Unknown is made up of 3 parts: an overture, a situation, and a complication. The overture and situation begin the game in play and dictate the setup rules and how the players will score victory points, which determine the winner of the game. You can think of the overture and situation as the opening premise to an episode of Star Trek. The complication is revealed at a later point in the mission, sort of like a mid-episode twist, and can change the rules and scoring conditions in the game. There are 2 types of missions in Star Trek Into the Unknown: story missions and incident missions. Story missions are intended to be played as part of a campaign with a connected narrative, while incident missions are intended to be used to set up a single win-or-lose match of Star Trek Into the Unknown. But there's nothing to stop you from playing an incident mission as part of a campaign, or playing a story mission as a standalone match. For now, we're going to be using the Learn to Play Guide's tutorial story mission at Perdition's Gate to learn to play the game. At Perdition's Gate is a conflict between the Federation and Dominion factions, both of which are included in the core set. We'll start by defining a 3-foot by 3-foot play area, which is known as the sector. Now, I have a play mat here, but if you don't, you can measure a 3-foot by 3-foot area and use these included corner markers to mark the sector's boundaries. Following the setup diagram on page 4 of the Learn to Play guide, we're going to place this 1-inch circle marker in the center of the sector and use the included measurement tool to place these 4 boundary markers in a circular formation. The area inside the circle is known as a system. All area outside of a system is called deep space. Next, we'll place the 4 objective markers as shown in the setup diagram, marking 2 of them with the orange control tokens and 2 of them with blue control tokens. Now we take anomaly tokens 1 through 3, flip them over to the question mark side, shuffle them around, and then place them as indicated by the setup diagram. Then both the Federation and Dominion player will take their corresponding combat directive card. The combat directive cards are the ones with this icon. Most missions will also use the Exploration and Diplomacy directive cards, but this tutorial mission will only use the Combat directive card. The Dominion player will place 1 Jem'Hadar fighter miniature just inside the system as shown by the setup diagram, and place an orange number 1 identification token and a System 1 token on the base. The System 1 token indicates the Jem'Hadar fighter is inside this system. The Federation player will place the Defiant miniature in deep space, giving it a blue number 2 identification token. It does not receive a system token because it starts in deep space. Find the matching shipboards and damage card decks for the Jem'Hadar fighter and Defiant escort and place them on the respective side of that player's play area. The Jem'Hadar fighter's alert dial should be set to yellow 1, and the Defiant's alert dial should be set to green 1. All other dials should be set to their starting positions, which are the positions marked with a star. The Dominion player should search the officer cards used in the mission and place them at their starting locations as indicated by the mission setup. The Vorta diplomat on the captain's chair, the Jem'Hadar second at helm, the Karema researcher at instruments, and Telek Talon at tactical. The Federation player should search the officer cards and place the following officers at these locations: Benjamin Sisko at the captain's chair, Daring First Officer at helm, Redoubtable Engineer at instruments, and Vigilant Security Chief at tactical. Place the priority token blue side up near the Federation player. This token indicates the Federation player is currently the priority player. Place the influence track card near both players, and place the influence token on the orange space labeled start position. In Into the Unknown, players will vie for control of the influence track, attempting to push the influence token towards their side, until the mission's complication is revealed. When the mission's complication is revealed, whoever has control of the influence track reveals their faction's complication, a mid-mission twist which usually benefits the player who had control of the influence track. Additionally, at the end of a game where both players are tied for victory points, the winner will be the player whose complication was triggered. A player is allowed to look at their faction's complication whenever they like, but may never see their opponent's complication until it is revealed. In At Perdition's Gate, the complication is revealed either at the end of a round in which the final control marker was removed from an objective token, or at the end of round 3. And now we've completed the setup for At Perdition's Gate and we're ready to play. But how do we do that? Let's start by reviewing the anatomy of a shipboard. This is the reserve dial, which represents how much reserve energy a ship has for performing various actions or blocking damage with shields. This is the crew dial. These numbers are referenced when the ship attempts various tests throughout the mission. The red number corresponds to command, the yellow number corresponds to ops, and the blue number corresponds to science. This is the hull dial. When the ship takes hull damage, the dial is decreased. Note the colored icons below the number on the dial. These indicate the damage status of the current ship. White means light or no damage, yellow means medium damage, orange means heavy damage, and red means severe damage. When the hull dial is reduced to a step with a different damage status, the dial stops immediately regardless of how much remaining hull damage the ship suffered. You'll also note that some steps have an icon to the left of the number and the damage status. Whenever the dial is turned past or stops on one of these icons, an additional effect must be resolved. When landing on or turning past the skull icon, the ship must take health damage by reducing the crew dial one step. When landing on or turning past the crosshairs, the ship must draw one damage card from its damage deck and apply the effect. When landing on or turning past the crossed out arrow, this indicates a ship is disabled. The ship is now limited to performing only the following actions: adjusting alert, healing, repairing, and forming a team, although the latter action is not used in this tutorial game. When landing on or turning past the explosion symbol, this indicates the ship is completely destroyed. The miniature is removed from the play area, and all officers aboard the ship are lost and cannot be used for the remainder of the game. This is the alert dial, which affects many systems aboard the ship. When the ship is in the green all clear status, the ship's power is weighted towards engines and instruments. When the ship is in yellow alert, the ship's power is balanced across many different functions. When the ship is in red alert, the ship's power is weighted towards weapons and shields. Some alert statuses can have many pips within that status. For instance, the Defiant has 2 different positions in the all clear status. When the alert dial is changed, it is rotated up or down 1 position. Some game effects, like using the call alert through a priority order, can allow you to adjust 2 positions instead, but a ship can never go directly from all clear to red alert or vice versa. Now, let's learn what each of the colored numbers on the alert dial mean. The blue number is the ship's recharge rate. This is how much reserve energy the ship will regain during the ready phase near the end of each round. The top red number is the engine power. This determines how much power is available to the engines when performing a maneuver, which determines how far a ship can move. The bottom red number is the impulse turn factor, and determines how far a ship can turn when performing an impulse maneuver. The yellow number is weapons power, which determines how much power is available when the ship is making an attack. The green number is the instrument's power, which both augments the range of the ship's comms and sensors, and also grants that number of rerolls during many tests. The purple numbers are the fore and aft shields, which determines how much damage the ship can cancel from attacks or other effects targeting those respective sections of the ship by spending reserve energy. Finally, the alert dial also determines the launcher status. While the launcher status is green, a ship can only fire probes. While the launcher status is yellow, the ship can only fire torpedoes. Note that the At Perdition's Gate tutorial mission does not make use of probes. These 3 numbers from left to right denote a ship's evasion, resilience, and warp drive. Evasion and resilience are checked when the ship is targeted by an attack. Warp drive is the maximum distance a ship can travel when it engages warp engines. Finally, a ship has a number of stations where officers can be assigned. Each station has a number of actions and abilities. Actions are printed in bold with all caps. Abilities are printed in white text with a black box. The white text of an ability either refers to the phase of the game where the ability can be used, or is printed as the word reaction. If the ability is a reaction ability, it will describe what event will trigger the use of that ability. Abilities do not require an officer to be committed or even present at the station to use. However, some stations' abilities, like the Defiance Engineering Station, gain an extra benefit when an officer with certain skills is present. Each station is also color-coded to indicate certain stations are together in the same section of the ship. For instance, on the Defiant, Tactical, Instruments, Helm, and the Captain's Chair are all on the bridge. It's also possible to assign an officer to a section without assigning them to a particular station within that section. When doing so, place the officer card near that section, but clearly separated from the station slots. Each section has an unlimited capacity for officers, but each station may only ever have one officer. This shows where each station is located on the ship, either fore or aft. Some cards or effects may reference the fore or aft of the ship. When they do, consult this information to see which stations on the ship are affected. There are two types of actions in Star Trek Into the Unknown. Actions given through a priority order and actions given through a standby order. This is the symbol for a priority order. This is the symbol for a standby order. The main difference between the two is that priority orders require a ready officer to be committed to an action, whereas a standby order is performed without the use of an officer. Each officer card is double-sided and has a ready side and a committed side. When an officer performs an action through a priority order, flip the officer to their committed side. An action given through a priority order at a station can only be performed by a ready officer manning that station, or in the case that that station is open, by a ready officer in the same section of the ship. So in this example, only our Vigilant Security Chief could fire weapons because they are manning the tactical station. However, either the Vigilant Security Chief or Captain Sisko could move to the helm and engage the impulse engines because the helm is on the same section of the bridge as Tactical and the Captain's Chair. The Instruments Station is also on the bridge. However, the Redoubtable Engineer has already committed to an action and cannot be used to engage the impulse engines. Some actions have a requirement, printed to the left of the action name. For instance, the Defiant's transport action from the engineering station requires the ship to be in either the all-clear status or yellow alert. Some actions also have a cost, printed to the right of the action name. These are skill cost that can be paid by committing an officer to an action through a priority order. The three skill categories are security, social, and technical. Though you don't need to memorize these categories, you only need to ensure the icons match on the officer committing the action. However, these costs can also be paid by spending reserve energy, one for each skill cost that was not matched by an officer committing to the action. In this example, the Vigilant Security Chief is given a priority order at the helm to engage the impulse engines. He is skilled in security, but he has no technical skill, so the ship must pay 1 reserve energy. Note that some actions, like engaging the Defiant's warp engines, may also cost 1 raw reserve energy. Star Trek Into the Unknown is played through a series of rounds, and each round has 5 phases. The priority phase, the standby phase, the hazard phase, the ready phase, and the hail phase. Let's start by discussing the priority phase. In the priority phase, starting with a player that has the priority token, players will take turns issuing priority orders to their units. To issue a priority order, a player will choose a unit and an action available to that unit. As a reminder, the actions available to ships are printed at each station. The exception to this is this mission's overture, found on page 15 of the Learn to Play guide, which adds a threat analysis mission action with a symbol matching the instrument station. If the threat analysis mission action is performed as a priority order, an officer must be committed to the instrument station. On their turn, instead of issuing a priority order, a player may pass. If a player passes, they may no longer give any priority orders for the remainder of the round. The priority phase continues until each player has no ready officers or has passed. You may find it wise to pass in the priority phase before each of your officers has been committed to an action. This is because, as you'll learn in a little bit, during the ready phase, only 3 of your officers are refreshed for the next round. The second phase of the round is the standby phase. Similar to the priority phase, players will take turns issuing standby orders to their units. However, the standby phase will begin with the standby player, that is, the player that does not have priority. Just like a priority order, to issue a standby order, a player will choose a unit and an action available to that unit. However, each unit may only be issued 1 standby order per phase. Additionally, officers may not be committed to an action during the standby phase. That means, in this example, if the Defiant were issued a standby order to engage the impulse engines, it would need to spend 2 reserve energy to satisfy the skill cost of that action, even if there was a ready officer available at the helm. Note that it is possible for a unit to perform the same action twice in each round, once through a priority order and once through a standby order. The exception to this is the fire weapons action, which may only ever be taken once per round. After any ships are given a standby order, any projectiles present in the sector may be given a standby order to activate. Projectiles with the inertia keyword, like torpedoes, must be given a standby order. Instead of giving a standby order, a player may pass, but only after each of that player's projectiles with the inertia keyword, like torpedoes, have been given a standby order. The standby phase continues until each player's units have been given a standby order or until each player has passed. The next phase of the round is the hazard phase. The hazard phase is performed in 3 steps, each one at a time, beginning with the priority player. Step 1, resolve effects from damage cards. Step 2, resolve effects from features such as anomalies. If any ships begin the hazard phase within 2 inches of an anomaly, that anomaly is revealed, and any ships that revealed anomalies must resolve their effects. Although probe projectiles and auxiliary units are not used in at Perdition's Gate, these units also can reveal anomalies this way. Step 3, resolve other effects such as special mission rules. If multiple effects would occur for a player in the same step, that player may resolve the effects in an order of their choosing. The next phase is the ready phase. The ready phase also begins with the priority player, but instead of taking turns, the priority player will resolve each of the steps of the ready phase, and then the standby player will resolve each of the steps of the ready phase. The steps of the ready phase are as follows. Step 1, remove peril. Each ship must remove a number of peril tokens by spending an equal number of advantage tokens, if able. Step 2, ready officers. The player readies up to 3 of their committed officers. Step 3, relocate officers. Relocate up to 3 officers, each to any one section or station of the ship that they are aboard. Step 4, resolve ready abilities. Resolve any unit or officer abilities with the ready phase ability. This includes each ship's engineering station ready ability, which allows you to gain reserve energy equal to the recharge value currently listed on the alert dial. Finally, we have the hail phase. Normally, this is where players would hail each other and negotiate, but these mechanics are not present in the At Perdition's Gate tutorial mission. It is worth noting, though, that the Dominion player may desire to flip their combat directive card during this phase if the requisite conditions for doing so have been met. After completing the hail phase, the player who had the priority token flips it over and gives it to their opponent, and a new round begins. Now let's look at how to make a test using the threat analysis story mission action in At Perdition's Gate, found on page 15 of the Learn to Play guide. Each test has a difficulty that sets the number of required success icons that must be rolled in order to succeed. Let's say we're making this test on an objective token that matches our player color and there are no opposing ships in sensor range of the objective. That would mean the threat analysis action has a base difficulty of 2, which would require 2 success results in order for the test to be considered successful. Let's go over the possible results that can be rolled during a test. These are the standard intuition dice that are rolled during a test. This is the symbol for success. This is the symbol for double success, which counts as 2 successes. This is the symbol for a breakthrough success. A breakthrough success also counts as a success, but also has additional benefits. One being, an opponent can never force you to re-roll a breakthrough success. In the threat analysis mission action, breakthrough successes may also be spent to earn victory points if the test was successful and the control token on the objective marker matches our player color. These bonus effects of tests are called kickers. A player may redeem each kicker only once per test. This symbol represents discovery, which is only found on expertise dice, which are added if the committing officer has a skill relevant to the test. A discovery result may be spent during the modified dice step of a test to turn that die to any side, or a discovery result may be spent during the resolve post-outcome effects step of a test to give the unit that rolled it an advantage token. These are advantage tokens. If a unit performing a test has an advantage token, it may be spent during the modified dice step of a test to re-roll any die. This is a peril token. If a unit performing a test has a peril token, an opponent may spend it during the opponent modifies dice step of a test to re-roll any die except a breakthrough success. This is the symbol for analysis, which may be spent on action-specific benefits. For the threat analysis mission action, an analysis result may be spent to move the influence marker one space towards your side of the influence track, even if the test was unsuccessful. Making a test is broken down into several steps. Step 1. Determine officer. An officer leads a test if they were committed to this test's action through a priority order. An officer may also lead a test if they are resolving an ability on their officer card that requires a test. Note that it is possible to have no officer lead a test if the test was performed through a standby order. For this example, though, let's have the redoubtable engineer perform the test as though he was given a priority order at the instrument station. Step 2. Determine dice. Gather a number of intuition dice equal to the required crew stat. For threat analysis, we're checking the red command stat number on the crew dial, which is currently set at 3 aboard the Defiant. If an officer leading a test has a relevant skill, add a number of expertise dice equal to their level in that skill. The redoubtable engineer is not skilled in discipline, so we don't get to add any expertise dice for this test. Step 3. Roll dice. Not a great roll, but the next step may help us. Step 4. Tester modifies dice. The threat analysis mission action allows us to re-roll dice equal to our instrument's power, which is the green number found on the alert dial, which is currently set at 2, meaning we get 2 re-rolls. The result looks a little better now. If we had any advantage tokens, we could spend them now to gain additional re-rolls. Step 5. Opponent modifies dice. Here, our opponent could spend any peril tokens on the unit performing the test to re-roll any non-breakthrough success results. But let's say our opponent has no peril tokens. Step 6. Resolve outcome. If there are a number of successes equal to or greater than the test difficulty, the test is considered successful. Here we have 1 success plus 1 breakthrough success. The test difficulty was 2, so the test is considered successful. And we gain a victory point. Step 7. Resolve post-outcome effects. Here, the player can spend any breakthrough successes, discovery results, and analysis results for additional effects. We do have an analysis result that lets us push the influence marker 1 space, and we have a breakthrough success that we can use to gain an additional victory point because the test was successful, and the objective token matches our player color. It's worth noting, if the test is considered successful against a control token that does not match our player color, this is considered a hostile act. Attacking a ship and launching a torpedo that damages an opposing ship are considered hostile acts. Although ramming is not used in At Perdition's Gate, ramming is also considered a hostile act. Whenever a hostile act occurs, check your faction's directives, as there may be consequences for performing these actions. This is the symbol for negative victory points. Some officers may have keyword abilities or effects that appear without reminder text. A complete listing of all of these abilities and effects can be found online, but let's go over some common examples that you might encounter when playing the tutorial mission. Cisco has the keyword inspiring with the command icon. Inspiring reads, while this officer leads a test with a specified stat, you can spend 2 analysis results to inspire their unit. To inspire a unit, if the crew dial is at or above its starting position marked with a star and below its maximum position, increase the crew dial by 1 step. Otherwise, gain an advantage token. Another example you might encounter is Talak Talan, which has the keyword Relentless 1. Relentless 1 reads, while this officer leads an attack or security skill test, you may re-roll up to 1 die. For each die re-rolled this way that results in a breakthrough success, their unit sustains 1 health damage during post-outcome effects. Whenever an officer takes health damage, place one of these trauma tokens on that card for each point sustained. An officer's health is listed at the top right of their card. An officer can never be assigned trauma tokens that exceed their health. If an officer has trauma tokens equal to their health value, they are considered to be incapacitated. While incapacitated, an officer cannot be readied, cannot be ordered, cannot lead tests, and cannot use their printed abilities. However, an incapacitated officer can still be relocated during the ready phase. Some effects can heal ships or officers. When a ship is healed, increase the crew dial 1 step to a maximum of its starting value marked with a star. When an officer is healed, remove 1 trauma token. If an officer has fewer trauma tokens than their health value, they are no longer considered to be incapacitated. Some actions are printed in italicized text. These actions are known as procedures, which are resolved by following standard rules through a series of steps. We've already covered adjusting alert, readying an officer, and healing personnel. Transporting personnel, forming a team, and launching a probe are not relevant actions in the Perdition's Gate mission. Let's discuss engaging warp engines. A warp maneuver is the only way a ship may enter or exit a system. Think of the system's circular boundary as a wall that is only possible to cross with a warp maneuver. In Perdition's Gate, the Defiant begins the game outside the system in deep space, so engaging warp engines may be a good opening move for the Federation player so that they can move into the system and start accomplishing objectives. Let's say Captain Sisko gives a priority order to engage warp engines from the captain's chair. We exhaust Sisko, who satisfies the skill cost, but we still must pay 1 reserve energy as a cost to engage warp. Note that a ship may not turn or reorient itself during a warp maneuver. This is a strictly straight-ahead move. Faster than light, no left or right. The steps for performing a warp maneuver are as follows. Step 1. Choose warp factor. Select a warp factor up to the ship's maximum warp drive stat, found here, the rightmost number printed on the shipboard. The Defiant's maximum warp speed is warp 9. However, if the current engine power, the upper red number found here on the alert dial, is lower than the chosen warp factor, the ship must pay the difference in reserve energy. Luckily, at the current alert level, the Defiant has more than enough engine power to cover a warp 9 maneuver without spending additional reserve energy. So let's go ahead and engage warp engines at warp factor 9. During a warp maneuver, a ship can move up to double the chosen warp factor in inches, so here we can move the Defiant up to 18 inches. Step 2. Place ruler. Place the ruler alongside the unit with the starting end aligned to the rearmost corner of the turning slot like this. The included rulers only go up to 12 inches, but you can place one at the other end of the other to extend the range if needed. The rulebook also suggests placing a tracking marker at the base of the ship to mark the starting position in case the maneuver needs to be aborted. This is not strictly necessary, but may be a helpful habit to develop when playing this game in case mistakes get made and a move needs to be undone. Step 3. Advance unit. Pick up the unit and move it along the edge of the ruler. If the unit's base passes over any feature, it must stop and resolve the effects of that feature before continuing. In Perdition's Gate, we have 3 randomized anomaly tokens. Consulting the table on page 15 of the Learn to Play guide, we see that numbers 1 and 2 correspond to a wreckage field, which forces the ship to suffer 1 peril or pay 2 reserve energy. However, number 3 is a frozen gas deposit, which gives the ship 1 advantage token. At a 2/3 chance of something bad happening, it's a bit risky to warp through an anomaly in this mission, but a player may wish to do so in order to get to an objective faster. Finally, after completing the advancement, place the unit and check for collisions. If the base of the ship would overlap another ship or be outside of the play area, the warp maneuver must be undone. Step 4. Check ranges. If any units, features, or game components have abilities that affect units within a certain range, check that distance and resolve any abilities that may apply. The other type of maneuver in Star Trek Into the Unknown is the impulse maneuver. As a reminder, an impulse maneuver can never be used to cross the boundary of a system. There are many types of impulse maneuvers: forward, lateral, come about, and reverse. Lateral and reverse maneuvers are not used in this tutorial mission, so we'll skip those for now. Let's say our daring first officer is given a priority order to engage the impulse engines at the helm and wants to perform a forward impulse maneuver. We exhaust him to pay for the skill costs. The procedure for performing a forward impulse maneuver is as follows. Step 1. Place the turning tool. Place the turning tool with its circular head fitted into the slot of the port for a left turn, or starboard for a right turn side of the base. Align its central notch to the center dot of the slot. Step 2. Optionally adjust heading. There are 2 points at which a ship can adjust heading during an impulse maneuver, before or after advancing through movement. Adjusting the heading before advancing is the more common option, but it can also be done after advancing, but never both in the same maneuver. So if we choose to adjust our heading now, we can't also adjust the heading after advancing the ship. It's also worth noting that both heading adjustments are optional steps that can be skipped if desired. To adjust a ship's heading, rotate the turning tool up to a number of notches equal to the unit's impulse turn value, the lower red number found on the alert dial. The stem of the tool must rotate towards the aft of the base. Note that it is not necessary to stop on specific notches. Step 3. Place ruler. Slide the ruler into the groove of the underside of the turning tool until the ruler's starting end is flush with the front end of the turning tool's stem. Step 4. Advance the turning tool. Pick up the turning tool, then slide it along the ruler's distance, up to a number of inches equal to the ship's current engine power, the top red number on the alert dial. Once again here, the Learn to Play guide recommends placing a tracking marker at the rear base of the ship just in case the move needs to be undone. Step 5. Advance unit. Pick up the unit and move it along the turning tool, aligning the central notch of the tool with the central dot of the slot. Check for collisions, which again means if any part of the ship's base would overlap the base of another ship or be outside the play area, then the move must be undone. Finally, remove the ruler. Step 6. Optionally adjust heading. Here again we have the option of turning the ship just as before, but we already turned the ship at the beginning of this maneuver, so we cannot turn it again here. If the ship is turned on this step, check for collisions again after doing so, and undo the turn if there is one. Step 7. Check ranges. Lastly, if any units, features, or game components have abilities that affects units at a certain range, check the distance to them and resolve any number of their abilities that apply. The other type of impulse maneuver in Perdition's Gate is the Come About maneuver. When a ship executes the Come About maneuver, simply rotate the ship carefully around its center point, keeping the center in the same position, and stop at any rotation. Check for collisions when completed. Sometimes when diplomacy fails, it becomes necessary to open fire. Let's talk about firing weapons in Star Trek Into the Unknown. As a reminder, the fire weapons action can only be made once per ship per round. If the Defiant had fired weapons once in the priority phase, it can't fire weapons again in the standby phase of the same round. In a game with more ships, this may become more difficult to track and remember, so you can use the Fired Weapons token reminders included in the core set to mark ships as needed. Also, remember attacking is considered a hostile act, so consult your faction's directive cards before attacking to know what the ramifications will be. Let's say our Vigilant Security Chief is given a priority order to fire weapons at tactical aboard the Defiant. Let's look at the Defiant's weapons. It has 3 phaser emitter attacks available, one in the fore arc, one in the aft arc, and one from any arc. This is the weapon's power cost. The attacker will need to have at least this much weapons power available on the ship, that's the yellow number coming from the alert dial, in order to fire. The attacker can also pay for the weapons cost by spending reserve energy, but the amount of reserve energy spent can never exceed the weapons power on the alert dial. If the power cost is printed as an interval, as it is here, the attacker can choose how much power to spend. This is the range of the weapon, and these are the effects of the weapon. For a beam weapon, like these phaser emitters, it shows how many dice to roll for an attack. For a torpedo weapon, it shows which type of projectile to launch. Let's discuss ship arcs using this helpful diagram found on page 25 of the Learn to Play guide. A ship's weapon can only attack a target in the specified firing arc shown for that weapon. To determine if a target is in an arc, trace each line defining that arc beyond the base and onto the play area, using a straight edge of the ruler if necessary. If any part of the target is inside those lines, the target is considered to be in that arc. When performing the fire weapons action, each weapon on the ship can then perform a certain number of attacks from that weapon's arc. The procedure for resolving an attack is as follows. Step 1. Determine officer. If an officer was committed to performing the attack through a priority order, that officer is considered to be leading the attack. Note that it is possible to not have an officer leading the attack if the attack was committed during the standby phase. Step 2. Choose weapon. Note that projectile weapons will have a different procedure that is followed when firing that we'll cover later. For now, let's say that we're firing the 4 starboard arc phaser cannon battery aboard the Defiant. Step 3. Declare target. The attacker must declare not only the ship they're attacking, but which end of the ship they're targeting. When attacking with a beam weapon, like we are here with the phaser cannon batteries, the attacking ship must have line of sight to the target. To determine line of sight, trace a line from any point of the attacker's weapon arc to any point of the chosen target within that arc. If the line can be traced without crossing a different end of the ship than the target is considered to be in line of sight. So here, the Defiant can target the Jem'Hadar's aft, but not the fore. The attacker and the target cannot be in 2 different systems, but either or both can be outside of a system in deep space. Finally, make sure the target is within the weapon's range. The range of the phaser cannon batteries aboard the Defiant is 4 inches, so we are within range here. Step 4. Determine dice. The attacker can spend any combination of weapons power and reserve energy to determine the weapon dice. However, each weapon power spent here is unavailable for the rest of the action, so keep track of how much weapon power is used and budget accordingly if you plan to make multiple attacks in one action. In our example, let's go ahead and spend all 4 of our available weapon power on this attack, plus 1 reserve energy for 5 intuition dice. If the attacker has a committed officer with a relevant skill, add the appropriate amount of expertise dice, but only if this is the first attack of the action. In our example, our Vigilant Security Chief has Ordnance 1, so we can add 1 expertise die because this is the first attack of the action. Step 5, roll dice. Step 6, tester modifies dice. If the defending ship has a sensor lock token belonging to the attacker can re-roll dice up to the attacking ship's instrument power stat, that's the green number on the alert dial. Here we don't have a sensor lock, so let's skip this step. The attacker can also spend a discovery result here to change that die to any face, or any advantage tokens on the attacking ship to re-roll an equal number of dice. Here we rolled 1 discovery result, so let's change that into a breakthrough success. Let's also spend our analysis result to trigger the Pulse 2 keyword on our phaser cannon batteries. This allows us to re-roll 2 dice. Step 7, opponent modifies dice. Here, the defender can spend any peril tokens on the attacker to re-roll an equal number of dice. Step 8, determine outcome. If the total number of success results is greater than or equal to the defender's evasion stat, that's the leftmost number printed here on the shipboard, the attack hits. Otherwise, the attack misses. During this step, the attacker may spend any analysis results on triggering additional weapon keyword abilities. Step 9, resolve damage. If the attack hits, the defender suffers damage equal to the number of success results. The defender must first spend any reserve energy available to cancel an amount of damage up to the targeted ship end's shield value. Any success results must be cancelled before breakthrough success results. If a ship has shields protecting the attacked section of the ship and reserve energy available, it must always block at least 1 point of damage with its shield by spending reserve energy. So here, the Jem'Hadar fighter has their aft shield set to 1, meaning the Dominion player must spend 1 reserve energy to block 1 damage. Then, the ship suffers the 4 remaining damage. The hull dial is rotated down 1 step at a time. Here, the dial passed a crosshair symbol, so the Dominion must draw 1 damage card for the Jem'Hadar fighter. Damage cards specify which end of the ship they belong to, fore or aft. The damage card drawn by the Dominion player lists only the fore section of the ship. The attack was made targeting the aft section of the ship, so this card is discarded and a new one is drawn until a card is drawn that matches the targeted end of the ship. This icon shows the station the card is assigned to. While a damage card is on a station, that station is considered offline, and only the repair action listed on the card may be taken in that station. The Jem'Hadar fighter suffered 4 damage and continues to roll down the hull damage dial, but stops after 3 steps, because the damage status changed from light to medium damage. Even though there is still remaining damage to suffer, it is ignored because the damage status has changed. Step 10. Resolve post-outcome effects. The attacker may spend any remaining results on the following effects. If the number of breakthrough success results is greater than or equal to the defender's resilience value, that's the middle number printed on the shipboard here, the attacker can force the defender to draw 1 damage card. We only rolled 1 breakthrough success, which is below the Jem'Hadar fighter's resilience value, so we cannot force that ship to draw an additional damage card. If there are any unspent discovery results, they can be spent during this step to add an equal number of advantage tokens to the attacking unit. Finally, if the attacker wishes to fire additional weapons, start back at step 2 with the additional weapon. Here, we could fire the Port 4 phaser cannon battery as well, but we used all of our weapon power on the first attack, and our reserve energy is running low, so we'll end the fire weapons action for now. Projectiles like torpedoes work a little differently than beam weapons. Each projectile has its own stats and keyword abilities, which are described on its matching unit card. A projectile has a limited endurance, which is tracked by placing an endurance marker behind the projectile's aft point. A projectile may be targeted by attacks and can be destroyed like other space units. A projectile can be issued standby orders during the standby phase of the round. Projectiles with the inertia keyword, like torpedoes, must activate during the standby phase and move their full engine power stat, which is the red number here. A projectile is removed from play after it is destroyed, it detonates, or it has no endurance marker at the end of its turn. This is the torpedo's evasion, referenced when an attack is made on the torpedo. These are the projectile's crew stats. Just like a ship, the red is command, the yellow is ops, and blue is science. This is the projectile's engine power, which determines how far the projectile moves. This is the instrument's power. This is the projectile's hull. When a projectile has trauma tokens equal to its hull value, it is destroyed. These are the projectile's skills, which become relevant when the projectile makes a test. These are the projectile's abilities, which govern how it behaves. And finally, these are the projectile's movement sides, which determine how the projectile can move. More on this later. When launching a projectile, pay attention to the launcher status indicator on the alert dial. When the green symbol is showing, only probes can be launched. When the yellow symbol is showing, only torpedoes can be launched. The steps for launching a projectile are as follows. Step 1. Determine officer, if applicable. Step 2. Choose weapon. Step 3. Spend power. Just like firing a beam weapon, reserve energy can be spent instead of or in addition to weapons power, but the amount of reserve energy spent can never exceed the current weapon power on the alert dial. Step 4. Place turning tool. Place the turning tool with the circular head fitted into the slot in the end of the ship launching the projectile. Align the tool's central notch to the center dot of the slot. Step 5. Optionally adjust heading. Rotate the turning tool up to a number of notches to either side equal to the projectile launcher's impulse turn value found printed on the weapon. Note that it is not necessary to stop on specific notches. Step 6. Place projectile. Place the projectile in the play area with its aft point against the notch at the end of the turning tool's stem. The projectile cannot overlap or be overlapped by another unit or feature. Step 7. Remove the turning tool. Step 8. Set endurance. Place an endurance marker with a value up to the projectile's maximum endurance against the projectile's aft point. When projectiles activate during the standby phase, they follow a standard procedure for movement. Step 1. Choose maneuver side. Consult the projectile unit cards for their maneuver sides. As shown on this photon torpedo, we can choose either of the lateral sides that are marked with a solid line, but if this projectile is within sensor range of a locked opposing unit, which is 4 inches for this photon torpedo, we may use the guided keyword to choose one of the dashed lines on the 4 side instead. For this example, let's choose the projectile's starboard side. Step 2. Place ruler. Place the ruler alongside the chosen maneuver side with its starting end aligned to the aft corner of that side. Step 3. Place tracking marker. Just as in moving ships, the Learn to Play guide suggests you place a temporary tracking marker against the side of the projectile opposite the ruler in case the maneuver needs to be undone. Step 4. Advance unit. Pick up the projectile and move it along the ruler to the intended position. Our photon torpedo has the inertia keyword, which requires us to move the full engine power amount, which is 4 inches in this case. Place the unit with its chosen side or opposite parallel side against the ruler's edge at the intended position. Note that this allows the projectile's final position to be on either side of the ruler. Check for collisions. If the projectile's template would overlap another unit or any part of it would be outside of the play surface, move the projectile within the limits set by its engine power stat until it can fit without overlapping the base of another unit. Step 5. Check ranges. Determine if the projectile detonates. Then, if any other units, features, or other game components have abilities that affect units at a certain range, check the distance to them and resolve any of their abilities that apply. Step 6. Check endurance. Place the endurance marker with the next lowest value against the unit's aft point. When the endurance reaches 0, no marker is placed. After a projectile completes a maneuver that crosses a system boundary, it loses all remaining endurance. Do not place a marker. If a projectile has no endurance marker at the end of its turn, it is removed from the play area. A player may never have more projectiles in play than their fleet's total number of torpedo tubes at the end of a round. If a player exceeds this limit of projectiles, remove projectiles from the sector until they no longer exceed this limit. Both beam weapons and projectiles benefit from a sensor lock on an opposing unit. Let's go over how to obtain a sensor lock using the Defiant and this Jem'Hadar miniature as examples. Let's say the redoubtable engineer aboard the Defiant is given a priority order at the instrument station to acquire a sensor lock on the Jem'Hadar fighter. Committing the redoubtable engineer satisfies the skill cost, but we must still pay 1 reserve energy. The target of the sensor lock must be within sensor range of the locking unit. The sensor range of the Defiant is 2 inches and 360 degrees, and 4 inches plus the current instrument's power out of the 4 arc. The current instrument's power is 2, which means the Defiant has a 6-inch sensor range out of its front arc, placing the Jem'Hadar fighter within its sensor range. The sensor lock action is performed as a test, where the difficulty is the evasion of the target, in this case 2. The op stat, that is the yellow stat on the crew dial, determines how many intuition dice are gathered, and the sensor power, that is the green stat on the alert dial, determines how many rerolls we will get. So in this example, we will roll 4 dice with 2 rerolls. Success! We have locked onto the Jem'Hadar fighter and place a sensor lock token matching the Defiance ID number on the Jem'Hadar fighter's base. A ship can only maintain 1 sensor lock, so if the Defiant locks onto another ship, the sensor lock on the Jem'Hadar fighter would be discarded. Additionally, if the Jem'Hadar fighter enters another system through a warp maneuver, the lock would also be broken. And that is all you should need to know to play your first game of Star Trek Into the Unknown. There is a lot more to this game, so if you found this video helpful, let me know in the comments and be on the lookout for future How to Play videos. And with that, you should now be ready to boldly go where no one has gone before, into the unknown.